Voters New Speaker Series. It gives me great pleasure. Yeah, come in, sit down. Great pleasure to introduce my friend, longtime colleague, Kelly Eviston-Quinnett, Kelly Q. So let me just give you some background of Kelly. She's the head of performance.
Hold on. Are you having trouble hearing back there?
Yeah.
Okay. So you want me to give you the mic?
Sure.
Okay. And anybody can come up here. I wasn't going to use the mic, but
It's mostly the echo.
here's this. See if that helps. Ron will tell us.
Okay, how's this?
That's
That better?
All right.
I'm going to start again, Joe.
Okay.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the League of Women Voters Noon Series, the speaker series. It gives me great pleasure today to welcome you and introduce our speaker, Kelly Eviston-Quinnett, my friend, longtime colleague, and person I've acted with and been directed by. Kelly is the head of performance at the University of Idaho. She was the recipient of the National Irene Ryan Scholarship presented by the Kennedy Center American College Theater Festival, which led to appearances on TV in All My Children and One Life to Live. This was obviously before she came to the University of Idaho. Her film credits include, but are not limited to, The River Murders with Ray Liotta, Home of the Brave with Samuel L. Jackson, The Basket with Peter Coyote, and Mr. Right with Paul Reiser and Martin Mull. Kelly has appeared in many stage performances. I can attest to that since I've seen many of them, including, but definitely not limited to, the National New Play Network's rolling premiere of Lucky Me by our own Robert Casely, and Bus Stop with Ellen Travolta. Kelly was also a guest artist for the MFA Playwriting Workshop at the Kennedy Center in 2000, and in 2016, she was honored with the National Kennedy Center American College Theater Festival Special Achievement Award for performance in her role as Medea in Medea, Her Story, which I was also in. Kelly is the first ever Uta Hagen Teaching Award recipient and the Mayor's Arts Award recipient for Outstanding Achievement in Arts Education. Obviously a well-accomplished person here. Today, Kelly will be performing excerpts from What the Constitution Means to Me, written by Heidi Schreck. Kelly will also share some of her experiences in performing this work across many venues and in many places, including Montana, Alabama, Washington, D.C.
Yes. Missoula, Spokane, Washington, Chicago. Yeah.
So please note, the performance includes language that some might find offensive, and there are references to sexual violence and abortion. So take that into account. There will be time for questions after the presentation. So please hold your questions until Kelly is ready to take your questions. And please help me welcome Professor Kelly Quinnett.
I might pivot, but I want to make sure everybody can hear me. Can you hear me if I go off the mic so that I can be with you? Great. So, hi. I'm really honored to be with you, especially during this time. I think we all experienced what loneliness could feel like during COVID, and then coming out of COVID, what reconnection could feel like. And and obviously we have been living through such tumultuous political times where you can taste the polarization and it was very important for me to do this play, which is pretty much Heidi Schreck's life, and it was also a Pulitzer Prize winning finalist in 2019. It was up for a Tony Award, so it has all of the accolades, but more importantly, her personal story is incredible, and it's in the context of being a student debater. And I want to say this, I'm not a student debater. I went to an all-Catholic girls' school, and I don't think they had debates. It was more like a speech or something. So I want to give you a little bit of context about the play before I jump in, because I'm not going to be doing all of the play. I'm just going to do the beginning, and then I'm going to get into the Equal Protection Clause, and I will, from her perspective, share her own personal story that is reflected in this Equal Protection Clause and what it really meant to her. So but first I'm going to say how she starts out. She starts out just telling you about what her life was as a student debater. And then she turns into this 15-year-old self, which you're not going to see me do, thank God. And then she proceeds to do the debate of exploring Amendment 9 and exploring Amendment 14. And if we have time, I'll go back and I'll do Amendment 14 for you, because I'm really proud of it. And I only messed it up once the whole entire year. But yeah, I'm just going to jump right into Heidi's own personal story from first person as the actor, if that's okay with everybody. I actually don't think there are any F-bombs in this part, but I do reference the abortion that she had. And again, in first person. So let me just get this. I think I can do this without this, but I'm gonna just hold this because I'm jumping around and it might. And I should say this. This is the hardest play that I've ever done in my life. The hardest. We can talk about that later, but just know that. Okay. So I'm gonna do. When I was 15 years old, I traveled the country giving speeches about the Constitution at American Legion halls for prize money. This was a scheme invented by my mom to help me pay for college. I would travel to big cities like Denver and Fresno, win a whole bunch of money, and take it home and put it in my little safety deposit box for later. I was able to pay for my entire college education this way. Yes, anybody want to clap for that? It was a long time ago. It was a state school like ours, but thank you. A few years ago, I was thinking about the Constitution, and I started to wonder exactly what it was that my 15-year-old self loved so much about this document, because I did. I loved it. I was a zealot. So I called up my mom, and I asked her to send me the speech. And this woman, who had saved everything from the beginning of my life, had thrown it away. So I decided that I would resurrect the speech and the contest based on what it was that I remembered about myself at 15. Here are a few things I remember. In addition to being terrifyingly turned on all of the time, I was obsessed with witches and the Salem witch trials. Theater, here I am, and most importantly, Patrick Swayze. And I usually have this great dance. The music comes on, I sing and I dance, time of my life. You won't get to see that except for this. My fiercest competitor was this genius girl named Becky Lee Dobler, who did a speech every year about how the Constitution was a patchwork quilt. The thing that she was so good at, though, is that in order to win this whole debate thing, you had to draw a personal connection between your own life and the document, and Becky she was amazing at this. She told these incredible stories about her pioneer grandmother who, I don't know, like 8 people along the trail. Now, this part, it was harder for me because I was pretty emotionally guarded at 15, and I did not want to talk about my grandmother. We performed these speeches to audiences of older, mostly white men, and in my memory, they're all smoking cigars. I would love it if you would all be the men for me. You're all men now. All right, thank you. Okay, I'm gonna start. I'm gonna be 15, but I'm not gonna do anything special to make myself 15. So here I am. I'm 15. Now I'm gonna skip to the end. The Equal Protection Clause is truly more miraculous than Clause 3. It says that we all must be treated equally, that we cannot be discriminated against on the basis of race, religion, sex, or immigration status. I do also have a personal connection to this clause, although I never ever would have talked about it at 15. So whenever I get to this part of the show, I have a desire to protect my 15-year-old self from talking about it. So I'm going to talk about the Equal Protection Clause as myself now. The Equal Protection Clause really is miraculous. We've used it to do so much good in this country. It was the heart of the civil rights movement. 26 years after this contest, it will be used to make marriage equality possible. A few years after I did this contest, lawyers tried to use the Equal Protection Clause to address the problem of sexual and physical violence towards women. As you may already know, and if you don't, you might want to read more, 4 women are murdered every day in this country by a male partner. 1 in 4 girls will be sexually abused by the time that they are 18. 1 in 4 women will be raped by the time that they are my age now. And over 10 million American women live in violent households. My mom lived in a house like this. So did my grandma Bee. And most likely my great-great-grandmother Teresa, although there isn't much evidence for this except maybe the fact that she died at age 36 of melancholia. I know this story very well, but I prefer to read it. My grandma Bee married my grandpa when she was 19. He was what we call in my family a good man, meaning he didn't beat up his wife and kids. He was a 6'6" logger who built the 1-bedroom house they lived in with his bare hands. Legend has it, he chopped down the trees to build her a house, and then he dragged the lumber up from the base of Mount St. Helens on his back like a horse. I've never understood why, because they had a truck, but that's the story. Grandma Bee and her good husband had 2 kids when my grandma got pregnant with my mom. One day, she was feeling antsy, and she wanted to go to Cowlitz County Fair. My grandpa took an extra logging shift to pay for the tickets. He and his partner Ray were sawing a 150-foot evergreen tree. They misjudged the trajectory of the tree, and it fell on my grandpa, killing him. My mom was born while my grandma was still grieving. My widowed grandma Bee supported her 3 kids by working as a waitress at the local diner. A young barber came in very often. He was good looking. My mom loved good looking men, as do I. My grandma married the barber pretty quickly, and pretty quickly he started to beat her up. He beat up her kids. They had 3 more kids together. He beat them up too. When my mom's sister turned 15, my grandma's husband raped her. She got pregnant and went away to have the baby. He raped her again. She went away again. She came back home after giving birth to a second child and graduated at the top of her class. By the way, all of these kids turned out to be pretty happy. They all had families that they adore and jobs that, like most of us, they kind of like. None of them perpetuated the abuse that had been inflicted on them. I know it's not good storytelling to skip to the end like that, but I don't want you to spend the rest of the show worrying about them, okay? They are okay. Like so many of us who go through similar things in this country, and there are so many people who do, they are mostly okay. I was so pissed off at my mom for telling me this story she told me when I was 15. And I was furious with her because I was a deeply heterosexual 15-year-old girl. I wanted to make out with boys like all the time. I did not want to think that they could be violent. I'm sure, yes, they could be troubled. I loved it when they were troubled. They could be a down-and-out dance instructor at a Catskills resort. The thing that I remember that I kept saying to my mom, though, is why didn't Grandma just take all of you kids and run away? But she had no answer. She went into a room, she shut the door, and she would not come out. But my dad, he took me aside and he said that Grandma was sick, that she had this thing women get called battered woman syndrome, which I was so confused by this, like, oh no, how do you catch that? And also, if you had ever met my Grandma B, you knew that this was an absurd way to describe her. She was almost 6 feet tall, beautiful, wild black hair, big muscles. In addition to waitressing, her other jobs included, I can't even believe this, log runner. This is where you stand on a bunch of logs in a raging river, and you take that giant stick, like your cane, but it's bigger, and you push the logs down the river like all day long until I have no idea where the logs go. This was not her dream job. What she really wanted to be was a painter. She taught herself to paint by copying Picasso, who was her favorite, and so her one-bedroom house was covered with all these shitty Picasso reproductions. And when I was a kid, I thought those were her paintings. It wasn't until I was in high school I realized that Picasso, not my Grandma B, had painted the Weeping Woman. It's funny. John and I stopped to visit my Grandma B on the way to my abortion, and I really wanted to tell her what I was doing. I thought she might be happy for me. My great-grandma had 16 children. My grandma had 6 children and a violent husband, and I thought she might be excited for me that I was getting to do something different with my life. But, oh, after the way my mom responded, though, we were sitting at her breakfast table eating this beautiful popover she had made for us for breakfast, and I really wanted to say, Grandma B, I'm pregnant. But instead, I said, Grandma B, I miss George. I have no idea why I said this. George was the sock monkey she had sewn for me when I was 3 years old, and oh, God, I loved that sock monkey. Truly, I murdered him with my love. He was missing an eye, he was missing a tail. Eventually, I had to put him in a little sock monkey coffin. I told my Grandma B that I wished that I still had George, and she went, because she was very unsentimental. But the following Christmas, she had sewn me a brand new sock monkey that I named George II. And when I turned 40, I decided that George II's friend was lonely, so I bought him a tiny red and white striped monkey that I named George II's friend. And to this day, I am married, but George II's friend is the most important person in my entire life. You probably think that I've gone off on a tangent. I haven't. And in 2005, the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment was invoked in a case called Castle Rock versus Gonzalez. Jessica Gonzalez obtained a permanent restraining order against her violent husband. A month later, he kidnapped their 3 daughters. Jessica testified, called the police 7 times. Jessica, terrified, called the police 7 times and went to the station twice in person to beg them to look for her daughters. The police not only refused to help Jessica, they told her to stop bothering them. By morning, Mr. Gonzalez had legally purchased a gun while their daughters waited in the car and then killed them. Jessica Gonzalez, who now goes by her original name, Lenahan, Jessica Lenahan very bravely sued the Castle Rock Police Department for failing to show up to protect her and her kids. The state of Colorado had recently passed a law that required police to arrest a person for violating a restraining order. So Jessica sued, she won, and then the city appealed, took the case all the way to the Supreme Court, and this court, led by Antonin Scalia, overturned her case, killed the Colorado law, and gutted the Violence Against Women Act by ruling that Jessica had no constitutional obligation to protect Jessica or her daughters. I've listened to this case so many times, and the thing that I noticed is that the justices spend very little time talking about Jessica as a human being. They never talk about her daughters. Rebecca, who was 10, Catherine, who was 8, Leslie, who was 7. Instead, they spend a long time arguing about the word shall, as in the phrase, the police shall enforce a restraining order. At one point, Justice Scalia and Justice Breyer get into a little discussion about whether either of them understood what the word shall meant. Scalia ultimately decided that shall did not mean must, which is confusing because Scalia was a devout Catholic. I'm the only Catholic in the house, I guess. Shall not kill, shall, it always refers back to the commandments. Feminist legal scholars have called this decision the death of the 14th Amendment for women. It is most devastating for Black women and other women of color, all trans folks, women with disabilities, immigrants, people who are far less likely to be helped by the police than I am. It is especially devastating to Indigenous women who suffered the most violence in our country. I really wanted to know why they decided this. I needed to know it, maybe because of my own history of this kind of violence, I needed to understand it. So I talked to a few constitutional scholars, and this is what I learned. I learned about 2 kinds of rights, negative rights and positive rights. Negative rights protect us from the government locking us up, taking our stuff, killing us. Positive rights are active rights. These are things like the right to a fair counsel, the right to a fair trial, right to counsel. Yeah, you got it, Kels. Our Constitution, with some exceptions, is a negative rights document. And Scalia, an originalist, was adamantly a negative rights kind of guy, which is in part why he decided that Jessica Gonzalez was not entitled to any active protection